Yo, welcome back, everyone. I'm joined by Reed Duke. We're going to watch another match very, very, very soon. I believe we will be going into round 12. We already have feature matches. Um, let's see who we got. We have Jacob Sampson versus Jonathan Dietrich. Dietrich. And it's the Hammer player we just saw win versus Merfolk. So, Merfolk lovers out there, type fish in the chat if you like Merfolk, and I guess type bop in the chat if you like Hammer. All right, so a Lord of Atlantis on turn 2. All right, let's see. Chat, do we think we'll see a bonk ASAP? Well, seems like it's gonna happen next turn. We're just gonna have a huge Stoneforge Mystic, chat. Huge. Whoa, we got Shadow Spear. Probably means there's a hammer in hand. But apparently the Merfolk player has 2 Dismember in hand, which is quite good in this scenario. We're not even taking any chances. We're just going to Dismember main phase to play around Blacksmith skill, probably. Do we have another Lord, or we're just going to leave up the Dismember? Looks like we're leaving up the Dismember.
Hey, thanks for covering Jarvis. So I'm thrilled to see Merfolk in the feature match area here, still this deep into the tournament. And
Yes.
Yeah, this should be an interesting matchup. I think. I think we've seen that Merfolk has some strong game in a wide range of matchups, but I'm not sure how it's going to line up against the Urza Sagas and Colossus Hammers here.
I'm excited to see a construct died to Merfolk Trickster.
Oh yeah, that'll be a good one.
Also, Tide Shaper on Urza Saga. There's actually a lot of really powerful tools for Merfolk just sort of built in the matchup. By the way, I guess you missed it, but on turn 2, Jonathan cast Stoneforge Mystic and is searched for Shadow Spear. And I think that gives a lot of information. Read! It already happened! It already happened!
Wow, love it. The sort of the mini game 1 dress down here.
I guess the real question is, are we going to see Gingerbrute activate, play a land, double hammer?
So yeah, that would either force a chump block or just be outright lethal.
So, given Jonathan's Stoneforge for a Shadow Spear, I'm pretty sure he has at least one hammer in hand.
Oh, all right. Wow.
So
some back and forth there, but in the end, it is well, it's Gingerbrute winning that game.
by the way, I don't know if you saw this. Jacob actually had 2 Dismembers in his opening hand.
Wow.
Sometimes you're the bonker, or sometimes you're the bonky, I suppose. All right.
Indeed.
Let's see. What does Jacob get post board? Harbinger of the Tide seems pretty good. Hercules Recall. We got some Hercules Recalls, Reed. How do you feel about that one?
That's perfect. I mean, that's exactly what you want. And Merfolk's a great. So, okay, Hercules Recall is not a card we see that often in Modern, but Merfolk is the perfect deck to take advantage of it. First of all, you're in a situation where your options are a little bit limited because you are mono blue, but also your deck is so fast that even like a 1 or 1.5 turn reprieve is more than enough to put you over the finish line when you have a good draw. So just playing out some Merfolks and having a well placed Hercules Recall is a great plan, I think, for Jacob.
Some other notable things about Jacob's deck. He actually has two main deck Harbinger of the Tides as well. I expect the two other ones to come in as well. They just seem extremely good to me. Chalice of the Void, I think, is more debatable if you want it on the draw or on the play, or even on just in period. I'm not sure if you want it or not.
Yeah, it seems like I don't think I would be interested in it. It seems like you're kind of trying to get lucky there, and like you could play it for 0 on the play, and maybe your opponent just happened to spike 2 mana cards in their opening hand or something. But I would be more interested in just sticking to my plan A game plan. How do you feel about Force of Negation though?
Um, I'm not thrilled about it, but it's okay. I guess the question is, what do you feel like you can sideboard out? Because since you're a tribal deck, if you side out too many creatures, I think that actually leads to some issues.
Definitely true. So you can maybe trim on some of your more expensive stuff, like subtlety, definitely does something in the matchup, but you're never going to tag a creature that costs more than 2 mana.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not ideal. Sviolon of Sea and Sky, you might not need the full 4 copies because the game's not going to necessarily go long enough for you to need to draw a million cards off of attacking with it. And
Mm-hmm.
then Vodalian Hexcatcher seems like the weakest of the lords for this particular matchup, where they're less about. Oh, actually, I stand corrected. It counters any non-creature spell. I thought it was only
Yep.
instants and sorceries. So maybe the
Mm-hmm.
Hexcatcher should stay in the full 4 copies.
Yeah, I don't think I would shave Hexcatcher. I think, to your point, I would cut the subtleties and I would go down to one Sylvain.
This game, we have Jacob on the play, keeping 7 against some mulligans, so we can expect this to
Mm-hmm.
be kind of his greatest advantage that we'll see in the matchup.
Yeah, I would say Hammer Mulligan's a fair amount, just because I don't think most of the games you can really keep a hand that doesn't have a way to equip the hammer, because that is your primary game plan.
So, in other words, looking for Sigarda's 8 or Pure Steel Paladin in your opening hand.
There's also one core outfitter in this specific version. I think that game he actually had 2 aids, but the rest of the hand was just not good enough, so he's choosing the mulligan again. So, what exciting thing do you want to see Merfolk do this game?
Well, let's get that Hercules recall in the mix.
Oh God, Hercules Recall.
I think a huge thing in this matchup is if Jacob is able to successfully tag Urza's sagas with either
Mhm.
Spreading Seas or uh, Tide Shapers, because that's a huge way to just like get value and punish an opponent who's already taken a mulligan, 2 mulligans rather. So let's keep an eye out for that specific matchup of cards.
Yeah, so looks like Jonathan's hand is not great, but he's reluctant to go to 4 cards. Or maybe it is great. That's an aid. Hmm.
Ornithopter, Springleaf Drum, Plains, Pure Steel Paladin. So basically missing the hammer.
Yeah, the hammer's the easiest part to get, I think, generally speaking, between the sagas, the Stoneforges. and drawing hammers themselves.
Double pure steel actually, and potentially keeping a nettle cyst in hand.
Oh, I see. It's a one lander as well, which is the other difficulty, right? Oh, Tide Shaper's just cast.
Yeah, so that makes me think that Jacob has, well, could be a couple things going on: redundant copies of Tide Shaper and or Spreading Seas, or just a bunch of 2 mana cards, and he's like, well, I'm gonna have my next few turns lined up anyway. But agreed that that's a card that I think usually has a different job.
Mm-hmm. Look at that.
Yeah, so we believe that Jonathan kept Plains, Ornithopter, Springleaf Drum, Pure Steel Paladin, Nettle Cyst, and then picked up the Sigarda's 8 on his first draw step, which
Yep.
is not great based on what we know of his hand, but it's going to be scary from Jacob's perspective of like, man, are you really just going to bolt a 5 and kill me on turn 2 with this Ornithopter?
Harder considering that that is now an island, although I suppose island still casts Colossus Hammer, doesn't it? Oh, look at that. That's Urza Saga off the top, right?
Yeah, that's perfect unless Jacob has yet a third Tide Shaper, which we talked about this yesterday. I think it's generally a false line of thinking that people say, "Oh, well, 2 Tide Shapers are already gone, so it reduces the chances that Jacob has another one." Instead, the factor that you should put more weight on is, well, Jacob's been playing in a way where he's been throwing out these Tide Shapers, which indicates that he might strategically be doing so because he has another copy in his hand. So I won't necessarily be surprised with either outcome here.
Hard to say no to Spreading Seas on that as well, which is a reasonable card to have.
Yep, there it is. Third copy.
Did you know that Avalanche Riders cost 2?
Perfect. And it also stops them from finding the card that would have killed you.
Right. This is a big germ token. Like, let's not get that wrong, because it also counts enchantments. So that's a 4/4 germ. Now 5/5. Yeah, we're just rumbling in.
The Tide Shapers have +1/+1. They do not yet have Island Walk, right? But this is, I mean, it's not that bad.
Right.
This is a race that Jacob can win since there's no blocker now threatening the Tide Shapers.
If Jacob has 2 lords here, it's just kind of brutal. Oh, that's a Harbinger of the Types to bounce to germ because it's tapped, right?
Looking good. And then just looking up what's Nettlesyst's re-equip cost.
I believe it's 2.
Okay, so that can rumble onto an Ornithopter, but not yet.
I think Jacob also has a Spreading Seas in hand, so he's really ready to kill every single Urza Saga that comes down. It's Spreading Seas, Merfolk Trister, and Master of the Pearl Trident. Ooh, Path of Exile, that's a tough way to do it here.
Yeah, super interesting. I was about to say like that it wasn't super obvious to me that Jacob should have played the Harbinger rather than just playing out a Lord. But given that Jonathan's main action card remaining in hand was a Path to Exile, it's working out perfectly because he has to spend that on a creature that's not particularly meaningful, and now Jacob is pretty firmly in the driver's seat.
Oh, kind of unclear to me which Tide Shaper is turning that plains into an island.
Oh, because it says as long as Tide Shaper remains on the
Yeah,
battlefield.
yeah, it's tied to the specific one, I believe.
I wonder if Jonathan knows that.
Yeah, I would have pathed the one that was turning my plains into an island. Or maybe they're both turning that one. And the third,
No, because the first one just
okay,
came down as a 1/1. The
right.
second one targeted the plains, and the third one targeted Urza's Saga. So if
Mhm.
I had to evaluate the situation, I think Jonathan just doesn't know that he could turn his planes back, and
Right.
so he just sort of pointed at one at random,
Hmm.
and it didn't work out in his favor.
Gotcha. I think it's sort of valuable in these situations to reassess or reread the card, but I guess if you have in your mind that's how the card works, you're probably not going to reread it, right?
Yeah, also interesting from like a tournament operations standpoint, because
Hmm.
the Tide Shaper doesn't instruct you to put a counter on it. So there's nothing attached to the card Tide Shaper that is a visual indication of the land turning into an island. Now the players voluntarily chose to put a die on the island,
Right.
but which makes the situation different. But let's say, for the sake of argument, they didn't have a die on the plains. Then Jacob doesn't really have to point anything out, and if Jonathan believes that the island wall creatures are unblockable and chooses not to block them, that's fair game. It's a little bit different, given that they did have the die as a visual
Hmm.
indication. um,
Right.
but yeah, just kind of like an interesting spot all around, with the multiple copies of a creature that ostensibly looked identical but actually wasn't.
Yeah. Definitely just a card that's worth clarifying, like what is actually going on with it. I think sometimes, but hopefully, that doesn't happen again to Jonathan, I suppose. Do you ever think about the fact that if you had shown people who used to play Merfolk of the Pearl Trident Tide Shaper, they would probably lose their mind?
Yeah, we've come a long way. In the old days, the weakness of Merfolk was always that it didn't really have an effective one drop, and all of the creatures cost 2 mana, so you were super reliant on having that turn one Ether Vial. But now, like, Tide Shaper is just great as a 1 mana play.
Great as a 2 mana play too.
Hmm. I was amazed to see that Silvergill Adept is not a staple four of anymore, and in fact, Jacob just does not have Silvergill Adept in his 75 at all. Like in the old days, that was the card. It was like, I am
Mhm.
playing Merfolk because Silvergill Adept is awesome, and I don't really care what the other 56 cards are. They're just supporting
Right.
Silvergill Adept. And look how far we've come.
Oh, look at this. There's Chalice of the Void on the draw. I'm a little bit more skeptical of it on the draw as opposed on the play.
Totally. Like, when are you going to find time? Are you just going to play Chalice for one on turn two on the draw after your opponent's already played out their 1 mana spells?
Mhm.
Maybe that's good enough, because there are cards like Blacksmith Skill and sometimes Colossus Hammer, based on the exact circumstances, that might not have been played ahead of time. So it could work out really, really nicely, especially if Jonathan chooses to search for a hammer or a shadow spear here.
That appears to be Cauldron Complete, which is the opposite of all of those.
Yeah, totally makes sense to go for the Cauldron Complete after the turn one Giver of Runes, because you have a really, really high
Yeah.
likelihood of untapping with the Stoneforge Mystic.
Also, one issue with the Chalice trying to prison out Colossus Hammer is Stoneforge can just get around it.
Yes, as can Urza's Saga.
Yeah. I've been really impressed by Culture Complete. Multiple formats.
Is
Just
it
hits
because
really, really, really
is it
hard.
because of the lifelink, the indestructible, or sorry, not lifelink, but everything else? Because of the
Yeah.
trample, indestructible first strike, or the ability to kill anything that it gets in combat with?
All of the above.
All right, good answer.
Yep. Obviously works through Chalice because it was cast off Cavern of Souls. I guess Merfolk Trickster can sort of fog it for a bit.
Yeah, it's going to be tough though with the Giver of Runes having to sort of
Right.
throw two things at it. I think this is just Jonathan kind of had Jacob's number in games 1 and 3 here.
Well, that Path to Exile is dead because of the Chalice, but let's see what else is in hand.
Okay, so Jacob
That's
can have
three.
Harbinger of the Tide now, or another
Yeah.
Merfolk Trickster to get rid of the Germ token. And
Is
Jonathan, if most of his
that's
stuff is shut down by the Chalice, maybe we have a game.
that's three hammers, a Path to Exile. The other two are Stoneforge Mystics? Or is it no, there's a core outfitter. Got it.
And so Jacob deployed Mutavault there, which is a powerful land, but it does mean that he is not able to double spell this turn.
Mhm.
And he did have another Merfolk Trickster, which he could have gone for to just kill the Germ. So I'm curious what his plan is here for navigating around Giver of Runes.
Well, also you could just move the hammer to the germ token with the core outfitter, assuming I saw it correctly. Maybe I
This
didn't.
is yet another one of those reading the cards and you're not going to be happy moments. There's no line of text on Cauldron Complete where you're going to be like, okay, thank God, thank God it says this, or thank God it doesn't say this. Everything is bad news.
Yeah. It is basically telling that in Mirrodin, that was three separate equipments, and they just mashed all of them together.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I have to apologize. Chat is correcting me that the the Merfolk Trickster, it killed the construct token in game one because the power and toughness is an ability of the construct token,
Yeah,
but in this
yeah.
case, the power and toughness is granted by the equipment, so the Merfolk Trickster can't actually kill the token. So I was totally mistaken about that.
Oh. Hmm.
Yeah, so I think we're going to see the Trickster flashed in, the Giver of Runes activated, and then Jacob is going to be in the unenviable position of just starting to throw creatures in front of the trampling Cauldron Complete to stay alive.
Right. We can also just block and activate Giver. Or we can just do this, which also makes sense. Oh, wait, so if Jonathan actually has a Paladin in hand, this is like overkill by so much, right? Yeah,
Correct.
it'll be 25 trample, and the Giver of Runes basically makes it pretty safe to do, I feel like. I guess if this Paladin got subtletied, you could actually die.
Yeah, so basically, Jacob needs to throw something in front of the Cauldron Complete, survive this turn at a low life total, and then
Mhm.
deploy another Lord and steal the game. That's sort of the Merfolk MO is just trying to get to
Mhm.
squeeze over the finish line by getting that one last turn. But the Pure Steel Paladin, yeah, like you said, it's gonna make a 25-25 trample, and the Giver protects against Merfolk Trickster, so I'm not seeing any way out of this.
That's probably not going to do it. Mm. All right. So Jacob was hoping that by blocking, he would confuse Jonathan and not activating Giver in response to Merfolk Trickster, but clearly that didn't work.
Okay, and the Trickster would have taken away Trample there,
Yep.
which would have been okay. Cool. Yeah, I like the way that both players played that. It did look like yet another impressive win from Hammer and Jonathan Dietrich putting himself in great position to make the top 8. We don't know exactly what record you're going to need, but that 10th win is looking really, really appealing right now with after this one round left to go before our cut.